Before this story begins, if you've ever believed in someone completely, trusted them with everything you had, and watched them use that trust to destroy you, then you already know what it feels like to be Sienna Calloway on the worst night of her life. But you don't know what happens next. What happens next is the part they never see coming. Not Derek, not the Calverton Group, not the men who built a 26-year empire on the bones of people who trusted the wrong partners at the wrong moment. None of them saw it coming, because none of them understood that the woman they left to die in a blizzard on an Alaska highway was not the end of the story. She was the beginning of it. Tonight, we bring you Storm Debt, a story about betrayal, buried truth, and what happens when the one person everyone underestimated decides she is done disappearing. If this is your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a story. If you've been with us for a while, you already know how this goes. We don't do half measures, and we don't leave threads unfinished. Before we go any further, drop your city name in the comments right now. We want to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. And if you're ready for this story, hit the like button and let's get started. The storm is about to begin. The Alaska interior in February is not a place that forgives mistakes. The highway running north out of Fairbanks cuts through terrain so vast and indifferent it barely registers human presence. A black ribbon of asphalt swallowed on both sides by spruce forest and frozen marsh, the whole landscape pressing down under a sky the color of iron. When the storm rolls in off the Brooks Range, it doesn't arrive gradually. It arrives like a decision. One moment the road is visible. The next, it isn't. Sienna Calloway is 25 years old and standing on the shoulder of that highway in a wool coat that isn't warm enough, a duffel bag at her feet, and nothing in front of her but white. She wasn't supposed to be here. A week ago, she had a life. A forensic accounting position at Mercer Hale Financial in Anchorage, a studio apartment she'd scrimped 3 years to furnish, a career trajectory that was finally starting to feel real. Then Derek Voss. Her boyfriend of 2 years, her supervisor, the man she'd trusted with her login credentials, her professional reputation, and the low-frequency hum of her loneliness, handed her to his partners like a tool he'd finished using. The frame was clean. Whoever built it knew forensic accounting as well as she did. Digital transfers routed through her credentials, timestamps altered with surgical precision, an offshore structure that bore her electronic signature on documents she'd never seen. When the FBI walked into Mercer Hale on a Thursday morning, Sienna was the only name in the file. Derek sat at his desk and watched her escorted out with an expression of practiced sorrow she now understands was rehearsal. By Friday afternoon, she was evicted. Her landlord had a clause she'd never read carefully enough. By Saturday morning, her bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. By Saturday night, Derek had driven her 3 hours north on the pretense of getting her somewhere safe while things cooled down, then stopped the car on a stretch of highway with no cell signal, told her in a flat, quiet voice that she should have known better than to get involved in things above her pay grade, and driven away. She walks. There is nothing else to do. The wind is building and the temperature is dropping and the snow is thickening from flurries into something that moves horizontally, a wall of white noise that erases distance and direction with equal efficiency. Sienna's fingers go numb inside her gloves within 10 minutes. Her ears burn. The road ahead is a theory. She doesn't know how long she walks before her legs begin to fail. The cold isn't painful anymore, which she understands somewhere in the dimming portion of her mind is a very bad sign. She sits down on the shoulder. Just for a moment, she tells herself, just until the wind eases. And the snow begins to accumulate on her shoulders and her hair and her lap, and the world narrows to the small gray circle of her remaining consciousness. Then headlights, not one pair, multiple, spaced at precise intervals, advancing through the storm like a military formation. 4 black SUVs, all-terrain tires cutting through 6 inches of accumulated snow without hesitation, moving in a convoy configuration that suggests discipline rather than coincidence. The vehicles are armored. This is apparent in the way they ride, heavy and deliberate, unaffected by the crosswind gusts that would push a civilian vehicle toward the shoulder. They slow when they reach her. Stop. The lead SUV's passenger door opens and a man steps into the storm without a coat, or rather, wearing a coat that appears to have been designed with the specific understanding that weather is an inconvenience rather than a threat. He is broad across the shoulders with the kind of physical economy that comes from training rather than vanity. His face is sharp-featured in the headlights, a lean jaw and dark eyes that take in the scene with a completeness that suggests rapid threat assessment is a reflex. This is Ronan Thade. He is 41 years old, and he is, by the careful accounting of several federal agencies across 3 jurisdictions, the most consequential organized crime figure operating in the American interior. He has survived 2 assassination attempts, a Senate subcommittee hearing, and a RICO investigation that collapsed for reasons that still frustrate the prosecutors involved. He is careful, precise, and known throughout the criminal architecture of the northern states for a single anomalous principle. Civilians are not touched, not used, not pressured, not harmed. The code is absolute, and those who have tested it are no longer in positions to offer testimony. He crouches beside Sienna in the snow and presses 2 fingers to the pulse point on her neck. Whatever he finds there is sufficient. He says 3 words to the man emerging from the passenger seat behind him. Get a blanket. Then he lifts her himself, carries her to the second vehicle in the convoy, and the doors close against the storm. No questions. No calculation. An unconscious woman in a blizzard is not a puzzle requiring context. It is a human being requiring warmth, and Ronan Thade has operated by that principle for 20 years without exception. The convoy moves. Behind them, the storm erases the tire tracks within minutes, and the stretch of highway where Sienna Calloway sat down to die shows no evidence that anything happened there at all. She wakes 3 days later in a bedroom that doesn't make sense. The ceiling is rough-hewn timber. The windows are triple pane and floor-to-ceiling, and through them she can see a mountain valley buried in snow, blue-shadowed and enormous, the kind of landscape that exists to remind you how small you are. The room itself is spare, but not Spartan. Heavy wool blankets, a cast-iron stove radiating dry heat, medical equipment clustered on a wheeled cart near the bed with the specificity of professional installation. A woman she doesn't recognize sits in the corner reading. Late 40s, compact and watchful, wearing a fleece that has the casual authority of someone who has earned the right to dress however they want. This is Maren Colt. She is, Sienna will learn later, Ronan's head of security, field medic, and the person most responsible for the fact that Sienna's fingers and toes are all still attached to her body. You had moderate frostbite on 4 toes and your left ear, Maren says without looking up. You're going to be fine. The doctor has been twice. Eat the soup on the table before you try to talk to anyone. The soup is there. Sienna eats it. The questions come later, hers, directed at Maren, who answers them with the selective precision of someone deciding what information is currently useful to a recovering civilian. She is at a private estate in the Alaska Range interior, roughly 200 miles from Fairbanks. She was found on the highway in critical hypothermic condition. The man who found her is the owner of the estate. She is a guest, not a prisoner. The door is not locked. Who is he? Sienna asks. Maren closes her book, studies Sienna for a moment with the kind of professional assessment that strips away sentiment without becoming unkind. Someone who will want to hear your story, Maren says, when you're ready to tell it. The first time Sienna sees Ronan Thade standing upright in a lit room, she understands she is dealing with a category of person she has no prior framework for. Not dangerous in the theatrical sense, not performing dominance or threat, but carrying the specific gravity of someone who has made consequential decisions under pressure for long enough that it has become structural, as much a part of his physical presence as height or bone density. He sits across from her in a room that serves as both library and operations center, walls lined with books and encrypted communications equipment, in a combination she finds disorienting. He listens to her tell him everything. The job, Derek, the frame, the highway. He doesn't interrupt, he doesn't write anything down. When she finishes, the room is quiet for long enough that she begins to wonder if he's simply going to thank her for the information and have her driven somewhere. Then he says, "Tell me Derek Voss's full name again, and the name of the firm." she tells him. Something shifts in his expression. Not much, but she is a forensic accountant trained to find discrepancies in data that looks identical to the surrounding data, and she catches it. "You know something," she says. "I know several things," Ronan says. "Most of them aren't relevant to your situation. One of them might be." He stands, moves to the window, studies the valley below with the posture of a man who has learned to think by looking at distances. Mercer Hale Financial has been a shell interest of a private investment architecture we've been tracking for approximately 3 years. We had no reason to believe they were using internal employees as scapegoats for capital movement. That's new information. She stares at him. "You're telling me my fraud case intersects with organized crime intelligence?" "I'm telling you," Ronan says, turning from the window, "that whoever built that frame around you was not trying to cover a financial crime. They were trying to bury a witness who didn't know she was a witness." He pauses. "Which means the longer you stay visible, the more danger you're in. And the longer you stay here, the more answers we're likely to find. It is not an offer of protection. It is a statement of operational logic." Sienna, who has spent the last week being lied to with warmth and charisma, finds the honesty of it more reassuring than she expects. She stays. The estate operates on rhythms Sienna initially mistakes for routine, but gradually recognizes as protocol. Men and women move through the compound with the purposeful quiet of people who understand that noise is a form of exposure. Vehicles come and go in the pre-dawn hours. Communications happen in rooms she isn't invited into. The household staff, 4 people, all of whom appear to have prior military careers based on their posture and their habit of positioning themselves with their backs to walls, treat her with a careful courtesy that never quite becomes warmth. Ronan is present but not constant. He operates, she understands, across a geography of interest that extends well beyond this mountain valley, and the estate is a base rather than a home. When he is there, he is focused, on her case, she discovers, with an intensity that seems disproportionate to the circumstances until she realizes his team has been running a parallel investigation since the night they found her. Decker Mull, 37, runs the intelligence operation from a converted server room on the estate's lower level. He is small, angular, and moves with the perpetual distraction of someone managing multiple data streams simultaneously. He briefs Sienna on what they've found with the flat efficiency of a man for whom information is architecture rather than narrative. Mercer Hale Financial is a legitimate firm on paper. In practice, it functions as a financial processing layer for a private investment consortium called the Calverton Group, a collection of 7 individuals operating across corporate, political, and private security sectors. The group has been moving money for over a decade through a rotating cast of shell structures, always staying 2 or 3 entities removed from direct liability. The internal scapegoating scheme Sienna stumbled into, or was pushed into, is not their first use of that technique. 2 previous Mercer Hale employees lost their careers under similar circumstances over the past 6 years. Neither had the forensic training to understand what had been done to them. The reach extends upward in ways that concern Decker. At least one sitting state legislator's campaign financing connects to Calverton. A former deputy director of a federal oversight agency sits on the board of a Calverton subsidiary. And threaded through the financial architecture in ways that are careful, but not careful enough, is evidence of payments to a private security contractor called Varon Solutions. Payments that do not correspond to any documented service contract. Varon Solutions, Decker explains without inflection, provides what the industry terms resolution services. They make problems disappear. They have been paid, across 3 separate transactions in the past 8 months, a combined total that implies a problem requiring a permanent solution. Sienna is that problem. She processes this in silence. Then, how long have they known I'm here? They don't, Decker says. Yet, but they know you survived the highway. They'll have assets looking. 3 days later, the first attack comes. It is not subtle. A vehicle convoy, 2 trucks, no markings, approach vectors suggesting prior surveillance of the estate's perimeter, attempts a coordinated breach through the eastern access road in the early hours of a Tuesday morning. Ronan's security team intercepts them 2 miles out. The engagement is brief and controlled. Both trucks are disabled. The 4 men inside are not killed. Ronan's instruction, which surprises Sienna when she learns it, but are incapacitated and their communications equipment is taken. Ronan walks her through the confiscated phone data himself the following morning, encrypted but not adequately so for Decker's equipment. The operational authorization runs through a private channel that connects with 2 degrees of separation to Varon Solutions. They're escalating, Ronan says. The frame was meant to ruin you quietly and give you reasons to disappear. When it didn't work, they moved to elimination. When that didn't work, he taps the phone on the table between them. They'll move to something bigger. What does bigger look like? Coordinated? Federal pressure on this location? Possibly? Leverage against the people who know where you are? Or a strike large enough that no survivor survives to answer questions? He says this without drama, which makes it more frightening than drama would. We need to move faster than they can organize. The investigation accelerates. Sienna is not a passenger in it. Her forensic accounting background turns out to be precisely the tool Decker's team is missing. She can read financial structures the way a surgeon reads tissue, identifying the places where the integrity of a transaction doesn't match the architecture surrounding it, finding the hidden load-bearing walls in an edifice designed to look like a different building entirely. She works 18-hour stretches at a secondary workstation in Decker's server room, cold coffee at her elbow, cross-referencing Calverton's financial records against federal filings, and Decker's sourced intelligence with the systematic precision that made her career before it was used to end it. She finds threads. She pulls them. The picture that emerges is older and uglier than any of them anticipated. Calverton's financial architecture doesn't begin 6 years ago, or even 10. Its deepest structural elements date back over 25 years to a period in the late 1990s that Decker references only obliquely, going quiet in a way that suggests the subject carries weight he is not yet authorized to share. Ronan notices her noticing. Between them, something shifts. Not suddenly, not announced. It happens in the margins of the investigation, a shared meal at 2 a.m. when both of them surface from the work simultaneously, the specific quality of silence that develops between people who have been under the same pressure for long enough that pretense becomes too expensive. He is not warm in the conventional sense. He doesn't comfort or reassure, but there is a consistency to him, a reliability of character that she had believed, after Derek, she would never trust herself to recognize again. One evening, deep in the 3rd week, she asks him why he came out of the vehicle that night on the highway, why he didn't drive past. Most people drive past. He thinks about this longer than she expects, because whoever she was, he says finally, she'd already been through enough. The second attack comes the following week, more sophisticated, a coordinated strike against the estate's communication infrastructure combined with a ground assault on 2 vectors simultaneously. This time, 3 of Ronan's men are injured. The estate holds, but only just. In the aftermath, Ronan stands in the wreckage of the external communications array and makes a decision she can see in his posture before he speaks. We're done playing defense, he says. We take it to them. But before the operation can be planned, Decker surfaces from 36 hours of archival research with a look on his face that Sienna has not seen before, something between professional satisfaction and personal distress, the expression of a man who has found something significant in exactly the place you were hoping it wouldn't be. He tells Ronan he needs to speak with him alone. Sienna watches Ronan's face as Decker speaks. She can see him through the glass partition between the server room and the communications office, and whatever Decker is telling him is doing something to his expression that she doesn't have language for yet. It is not shock. It is more like the reconfiguration that happens when a person understands for the first time the actual shape of something they have been misreading for years. Ronan asks her to sit down. It is not a request he makes often. She sits. He stands by the window, his habitual position when he is preparing to say something that costs him something, and begins in a place she doesn't expect. Not with the Calverton Group, not with Derek Voss or the Frame or the Varon Solutions payments. He begins with himself, with a night in January 26 years ago when he was 15 years old. She listens. The Fed family, his father, his mother, his older sister, operated in the criminal ecosystem of the Pacific Northwest interior in the late 1990s with the low-profile competence that comes from 3 generations of knowing how power actually moves. They were not large, they were careful, and they were principled in the specific way that criminal organizations which survive are principled. They did not expand recklessly, they did not harm civilians, and they kept their arrangements with the people above them clean. In the winter of 1998, the architecture above them changed violently. A consortium of interests, several of which Ronan now recognizes with cold retrospective precision as the founding partners of what would eventually become the Calverton Group, decided to consolidate territory and eliminate competing structures. The purge was organized, funded, and executed over a period of 6 weeks with the efficiency of a hostile corporate acquisition. 11 families were either absorbed or destroyed. The Thades were on the destruction list. Ronan was in a safe house in eastern Oregon when the order came down. His parents were in Seattle. They received intelligence about the hit, a minimum of 6 hours of advance warning, and they had 2 options: run or use those 6 hours to extract their son before running. They did not run. They spent the 6 hours coordinating Ronan's extraction with the only people they trusted, a couple, living clean, who had left the life 6 years earlier and built something quiet in northern Oregon under different names. A man and a woman who had made enough contacts in their previous life to move a 15-year-old boy across 3 state lines without anyone knowing he'd moved. Their names, in the life they left behind, were Elena and Marcus Calloway. They got Ronan out. Then they disappeared, into the machinery of their own past, into the network they'd called in the last favor of, into a story that Ronan was never able to reconstruct completely because they were careful, and because a few months after his extraction, the only people who could have told him anything about what happened to them were also gone. He has been trying to find them, intermittently, for 20 years, not with urgency. He had long ago accepted that they were dead. The purge was thorough. He looks at Sienna. She already knows. He can see it in her face, the way the information is organizing itself into a shape she has been afraid, on some structural level, to look at directly. Her parents died when she was 3 years old. She was raised by an aunt in Juneau who told her they were killed in a car accident. She had no reason to question this. There was a death certificate. There was a small grave marker in a Portland cemetery that she visited twice in her life. There was no car accident. They were found 3 months after Ronan's extraction by the same consortium that ordered the Thade purge, because they'd called in enough favors that their location could be traced backward through the network, because helping Ronan had made them visible, because the people who wanted the Thades gone did not want any loose ends with the knowledge of how clean that extraction had been. Elena and Marcus Calloway died protecting a 15-year-old boy who grew up to become the man sitting across from their daughter. The room is very quiet. Sienna doesn't cry. She is, Ronan will think later, her parents' daughter in this as in everything. She receives the information with a stillness that is not absence of feeling, but mastery of it, a controlled interior process that only becomes visible in the fractional tension of her jaw and the particular way she is holding her hands in her lap. The Calverton Group, she says, finally. The founding partners were directly involved in the order. 3 of the original 7 are still active. Ronan's voice is flat. The frame they built around you, the scapegoating, the charges, the highway, it wasn't random. Someone in that structure recognized your name, maybe from an old file, maybe from a financial relationship with Mercer Hale that triggered a background check. They knew who you were before they ruined you. She absorbs this. They tried to bury you again, she says, the way they buried them. Yes. Another silence. Then Sienna looks up, and her expression has clarified into something with edges. Then we don't just expose what they did to me, she says. We expose all of it, everything, 26 years of it. Ronan meets her eyes. That was already my intention. The quality of the air between them changes, not dramatically. There is no moment of declaration, no crossing of an obvious threshold, but the mission has changed shape, and they both feel it. This is no longer a fugitive trying to clear her name. This is 2 people who share a debt of blood, aligning themselves to collect it. The operational planning begins that night. It is the most complex undertaking Ronan's organization has executed in years, and he is honest with his team about why. This is personal Personal missions introduce risk variables that operational discipline usually excludes. He outlines exactly what he expects from each person in the room to compensate. Decker works the financial and communications architecture. He needs to build a package of evidence. Everything they have on the Calverton Group, the Varon Solutions payments, the political connections, the original Purge financing that can survive federal legal scrutiny. Not just enough to get an arrest, enough to make it airtight, to make the prosecution of each individual member of the structure inescapable under the weight of documentation alone. Marin works the human intelligence side, the witnesses, the former Calverton employees and associates who know things and have spent 20 years assuming no one would ever ask. She is good at finding people who are ready to tell the truth and simply needed someone capable of protecting them long enough to say it. Sienna works the financial forensics. She builds the evidentiary spine, transaction by transaction, entity by entity, connecting the clean-looking surface to the structure beneath it with the meticulous precision of someone who has spent her career doing exactly this, now doing it for the most important case of her life. And Varon Solutions has not stopped moving. 3 weeks into the planning, they make another attempt, not against the estate this time, but against Decker's external intelligence contacts, 2 of whom are hit at their homes in a coordinated strike across 2 cities on the same morning. One survives, one does not. Ronan hears the news and is quiet for a long time. Then he accelerates the timeline. "We finish this in 10 days, he tells his team. "Whatever isn't ready in 10 days doesn't come with us." The operational plan has 3 simultaneous components, and the success of each depends on the failure of the Calverton Group to understand, until it is too late, that all 3 are in motion at once. The first component is the evidence package. Decker and Sienna completed in 72 hours of continuous work, sleeping in shifts, running verification protocols on every document and financial record in the package to ensure that nothing in it can be challenged on procedural grounds. By the time they finish, the evidence archive is the most thorough organized crime and financial fraud prosecution package either of them has ever seen. Sienna signs her name to the financial analysis sections as expert witness, formally and on record. She understands what this means. It makes her visible again, after weeks of invisibility. It is a calculated exposure. The second component is the federal handoff. Ronan has a contact inside the FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force, a relationship built over years on the principle of selective information sharing, the kind of arrangement that neither party officially acknowledges, but both parties value. The contact's name is Audra Fenwick, a senior agent who has spent 11 years trying to build a case against organizations like the Calverton Group and who receives the evidence package with the specific controlled expression of someone trying not to betray how significant they know it to be. Fenwick's team begins securing warrants. This takes 36 hours. Every hour, Varon Solutions is moving. The third component is the confrontation that Ronan knows is inevitable, regardless of the evidence package. The Calverton Group has learned, through a leak in their own intelligence network, that Marin arranged specifically to be found, that Ronan and Sienna will be at a specific location, a coastal industrial port facility on the southern Alaska coast, ice-locked, decommissioned, chosen because it is sufficiently remote that the group will feel confident bringing their full Varon Solutions apparatus to bear without exposure risk. This is the trap. The port is not abandoned. Ronan's team has been seeding it for 4 days. Surveillance equipment in every structural corner. 3 response teams positioned at concealed access points. Marin on the roof of the main processing facility with a long-range communications array that patches directly to Fenwick's federal team, who are 40 minutes out by helicopter. Ronan and Sienna arrive at the port facility at 11 p.m. in a storm that has been building off the Gulf of Alaska for 2 days. Not a blizzard, but close enough, driving snow and 40-knot gusts off the water that reduce visibility to 100 yards and turn the industrial landscape of shipping containers and frozen cranes into something out of a nightmare. The emergency lighting on the facility's exterior flickers through the snow. The sound of the wind in the superstructure is structural, a continuous low moan. The Calverton Group's people arrive 20 minutes later. Ronan counts 14 from the surveillance feeds, a mix of Varon Solutions contractors and private security, moving in 2 columns through the facility's main gate with the efficiency of people who do this professionally. Behind them, in a vehicle that stops 20 yards inside the gate, is the man who has been coordinating the operation against Sienna since her name appeared in a Calverton background file 8 months ago. Warren Pelcroft, 62, was the founding chair of the Calverton Group and the architect of the 1998 purge that killed Sienna's parents. He is lean and patrician in the way that certain men are who have exercised power for long enough that it has become aesthetic, a physical posture of entitlement so deep it reads as simply the way a man holds himself. He does not get out of the car immediately. He waits for his people to clear the approach. Ronan steps into the light. What happens in the next 90 seconds is controlled chaos. The response teams emerging from concealment. Varan contractors caught between covering positions they haven't fully taken. A firefight that tears through the processing facility's main bay in flashes of muzzle light and emergency strobes. The wind screaming through every gap in the structure. Sienna is not in the open. She is in a hardened position in the facility's communications room, running the surveillance feeds and maintaining radio contact with both Marin and Fenwick's incoming team, but she can hear it, and the sound of it is different from what she expected. Less cinematic, more mechanical. The sound of consequences. Ronan reaches Pelcroft's vehicle as the man is attempting to move toward the facility's secondary exit. He stops him with the specific controlled force of someone who knows exactly how much force is needed and applies precisely that amount. No more. He doesn't hit him. He holds him against the vehicle and waits for the sound of helicopter rotors over the storm. Fenwick's team comes in fast and low over the frozen water. 3 helicopters cutting through the snow with searchlights blazing, emergency frequencies crackling on every channel. The arrest teams deploy with the practiced efficiency of a federal operation that has been waiting 11 years for a case this solid. Pelcroft is cuffed without violence. His team stands down when the federal agents establish perimeter. Varan Solutions contractors are professionals, and they understand when the mathematics of a situation has moved past the point where resistance improves outcomes. Sienna watches on the surveillance feed as Warren Pelcroft is walked toward a federal helicopter in the blowing snow, his composed patrician bearing finally beginning to fracture under the weight of the specific look Ronan gives him as the agents take him past. Not anger, not triumph. Something colder and more final. The expression of a man collecting a debt that has been outstanding for 26 years. In the operations center above the port's main floor, Marin calls out contacts as they're secured, names falling from the list one by one like load-bearing elements being removed from a structure that can no longer stand. At 2:47 a.m., the last active Varan Solutions contractor on site is in federal custody. At 3:09 a.m., Decker confirms that simultaneous raids on Calverton Group members in 4 cities are proceeding per federal coordination. At 3:22 a.m., Sienna puts down her headset, leans back in her chair, and listens to the wind hammering the facility's exterior while the snow keeps falling and the helicopters keep their lights on the frozen water outside, and everything that has been true for the last 6 weeks begins to become something she will have to figure out how to live with. Ronan finds her there. He doesn't say anything. He sits down in the empty chair beside her, and they watch the federal teams work through the monitors. And the storm outside does what storms do. It blows itself out, gradually, the gusts spacing further apart, the snow thinning, the dark water beginning to settle. The legal process takes 11 months. This is the unglamorous truth about justice. It is slow and administrative and full of depositions, evidence reviews, discovery proceedings, and interminable delays driven by defense attorneys who are excellent at their jobs and are paid to be. Sienna is deposed 9 times. She testifies twice. She sits in conference rooms with federal prosecutors and explains, in exhaustive technical detail, how the Calverton Group's financial architecture worked and how the frame was constructed around her. And she does this with the forensic precision of an expert witness who has had a great deal of time to understand exactly what was done to her and how. The charges span 3 federal jurisdictions: financial fraud at a scale that triggers mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and, most significantly, for the oldest of the original Calverton members, accessory to homicide charges related to the 1998 purge. Warrants connect to cold case files that have been open in 3 states for over 2 decades. The forensic accounting trail Sienna built becomes the evidentiary spine of not one prosecution but 7 simultaneous federal cases. Warren Pelcroft is convicted on 11 counts. He is 73 years old at sentencing, and the judge is not sentimental about this. Derek Voss, who cooperated with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence and received a reduction that still amounts to 6 years in a federal facility, gives a statement in the Pelcroft trial that Sienna does not attend. She reads the transcript. What strikes her most is how small his reasons were. Advancement, money, the desire to be the kind of man he believed Pelcroft was. The betrayal was not personal. That is somehow worse. Her reputation is formally restored by the SEC. An FBI joint statement issued the week the first Calverton conviction is handed down. The framing is clinical. All charges against Sienna R. Calloway are dropped in light of evidence demonstrating her credentials, records, and digital signature were fraudulently used without her knowledge or consent. Her professional license, which had been suspended pending investigation, is reinstated. She receives 11 calls from former colleagues and supervisors in the first week. She returns 4 of them. But the legitimization of Ronan Thady's operation is not a clean story, and he doesn't try to make it one. What it is, instead, is a process. Deliberate, methodical, taking approximately 2 years and drawing on a legal team that has been working toward this possibility in pieces for the better part of a decade. The criminal architecture he has operated within is not dissolved overnight, and the men and women who have worked for him have lives and obligations that can't be severed with a single decision. He moves carefully, deconstructing the parts that can no longer be justified while building, in parallel, the legitimate structures that will eventually replace them. The Thady Foundation is established in the second year. Its initial mandate is straightforward: financial and legal support for individuals who have been wrongfully convicted or framed for financial crimes, with a focus on cases where the target lacked the resources or institutional access to mount an adequate defense. Sienna chairs the board. She is 27 years old, and she designs the organization's intake process with the systematic precision of someone who knows exactly what it feels like to be on the wrong end of a frame with no one capable of helping you. In the third year, the foundation expands. Housing support for individuals displaced by financial fraud prosecutions. Forensic accounting advocacy. A legal defense fund that has, by its 5th year, contributed to the exoneration of 31 individuals across 14 states. Decker comes to work for the foundation in a cybersecurity and fraud investigation capacity. Marin runs the security operation for the first 3 years and then retires to a property in northern British Columbia that she has apparently been planning for quite some time. Audra Fenwick, the FBI agent, is promoted twice in the years following the Calverton convictions. She and Sienna maintain a professional relationship that is, over time, also a friendship, built on the shared understanding of 2 women who found each other across a complicated institutional divide and discovered they were working toward the same thing from different directions. There is a cabin on a lake in the Alaska interior, about 40 miles from the estate where Sienna spent those first weeks of recovery in the wool-blanketed warmth of a room she didn't expect to be safe in. Ronan bought it not as a strategic asset, but because it reminded him of a feeling he'd been trying to locate for 20 years without knowing what he was looking for. The winters here are long and genuine, and the snow falls without drama, without the howling chaos of the storm that brought them to each other, but with the patient accumulation of a natural thing doing what natural things do. Spruce forest surrounds the lake on 3 sides. In the deep cold, the water goes perfectly flat under the ice, and the quiet is absolute. Their son is 4 years old. His name is Marcus, and he has Sienna's precision and Ronan's patience and a laugh that seems disproportionate to his size, the kind of laugh that arrives without warning and fills a room. On a morning in February, he is standing at the edge of the frozen lake in a red coat that makes him visible from every angle of the surrounding forest, a deliberate choice by his parents who are, both of them, people for whom visibility is a complicated variable. And he is laughing at the snow that has begun to fall, holding his hands out to catch it, turning his face up to the sky. Sienna stands in the doorway of the cabin with coffee she hasn't drunk yet, watching him. Ronan comes to stand beside her. He is carrying his own coffee. For a moment they are just 2 people in a doorway, watching a child discover that snow lands on your tongue and tastes like nothing, and also like everything, and neither of them has anything they need to say. The debt that held them has been paid, not by violence and not by grief and not by the specific mechanics of revenge, but by the slow hard work of honoring the people who deserved it. Her parents, who gave a frightened boy a future at the cost of their own, and who in doing so set in motion a chain of consequence that traveled 26 years through storm and loss and betrayal before it arrived, finally, at this. A red coat on a frozen lake, snow falling without malice or intention, a life that was very nearly buried, growing in the light. The storm that should have ended her was only the beginning. Storm debt. Original treatment, sole ownership, and all rights reserved. Part 3. Free. Cuộc kịch bản điện ảnh này được triển khai với dung lượng 4.000 đến 4.500 từ. Bắt đầu trực tiếp từ điểm kết thúc của Part 2. Yêu cầu bắt đầu ngay lập tức từ điểm không còn đường lui của phần trước. Trọng tâm của phần này là bước ngoặt lớn, the twist. Một sự thật kinh hoàng bị phơi bày hoặc một sự phản bội bất ngờ khiến toàn bộ kế hoạch của nhân vật chính bị phá hủy hoàn toàn. Duy trì giống văn mỹ thô ráp, giàu cảm xúc, không sáo rỗng. Hãy kể theo ngôi thứ 3, tập trung khai thác sự bàng hoàng, tuyệt vọng và những phản ứng tâm lý cực đoan của nhân vật khi đối mặt với thất bại. Hồi thoại phải sắc lạnh, mang tính chất thẩm vấn hoặc bộc phát sự phẫn nộ. Đảm bảo liên tục xuất hiện cú twist hấp dẫn theo mạch truyền để gây sự tò mò, gay cản. Xung đột diễn ra liên tiếp với nhiều cú plot twist và cuốn hút để thu hút giữ chân người đọc. Triển khai chi tiết từng phân cảnh, scene by scene, với nhịp điệu dồn dập, tuyệt đối không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng, tiêu đề phụ hay nhắc đến thực thể tôn giáo. Kết thúc phần 3 bằng một tình huống ngặt nghèo nhất, buộc nhân vật phải thay đổi hoàn toàn bản chất để tồn tại. Hãy trình bày trực tiếp trong tin nhắn, viết cực kỳ chi tiết từng cử chỉ nhỏ. Nếu đặt giới hạn phản hồi, hãy dừng lại ở một câu rạng rỡ để tôi ra lệnh viết tiếp nhằm giữ độ sâu cho kịch bản lồng tiếng. Chỉ dẫn bắt buộc. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu nhằm mục đích giải trí, không dựa trên bất kỳ sự kiện hay nhân vật có thật nào. Lưu ý đặc biệt quan trọng. Nếu đạt đến giới hạn trả lời, không được dựng giữa câu, hay viết nốt câu đó hoàn chỉnh, không mở rộng nội dung. Artist Shomor Ronan comes back to the main room at 5:17 a.m. and he looks like a man who has walked through something and come out the other side carrying more weight than he went in with. Sienna is still at the workstation. She hasn't moved except to pour a second cup of coffee that she hasn't touched. The encrypted drive is on the desk in front of her, and the Calverton file is still open on the screen, and she has been sitting with both of them in the blue-lit dark of the pre-dawn room, thinking about cracks and the people who find them. Ronan sits down across from her without preamble. He looks at her face, and then at the screen, and then back at her face. You heard. The door was open. He nods once, accepts this. Cole's sister, Sienna says. Marin's moving her. She'll be out of reach by 6. He says it with the precision of someone reporting a completed task, but there's something underneath it, not softness, but the specific weight of a man who has made a decision that cost him something and is not pretending it didn't. You're protecting her, Sienna says, even after what he did. Elaine didn't do anything. He picks up the coffee she hasn't touched, looks at it, sets it back down. Cole made a choice under pressure. That's his to answer for. His sister is a civilian with a 4-year-old kid, and she's got nothing to do with any of this. Sienna looks at him for a long moment. Your code, she says. My code, he confirms, without irony or performance. She turns back to the screen. Then I need to show you something, she says, before you decide what the next move is. Because what I found tonight changes the shape of everything. She walks him through it the way she would walk a prosecutor through a complex financial structure, methodically, starting with the architecture and moving inward toward the load-bearing elements. The Calverton Group's 1998 financial records, the 3 red nodes that Decker couldn't close, the capital flows that don't correspond to any documented Calverton business operation during that 18-month window, routed through a series of instruments that have the specific fingerprint of operational expenditure rather than investment, money being spent to accomplish something, not money being grown. Operational expenditure for what? Ronan asks. That's where it gets structural. She pulls up the second document. cross-referenced against the Pacific Northwest criminal incident records from that period, court filings, federal investigation logs, everything that's in the public domain. There are 11 families that experienced significant disruption between mid-97 and early 99. Assets seized, leadership eliminated, operations absorbed by adjacent structures. She pauses. The Calverton Group's capital outflow during that period maps to those 11 events with a correlation coefficient of 0.94. Ronan is very still. They didn't just benefit from the consolidation, Sienna says. They funded it. They were the financial architecture behind the purge. She looks at him. Every hit, every family. Calverton paid for all of it. The room is quiet except for the wind and the distant sound of Marin's voice in the north corridor, still coordinating, still moving pieces. Ronan stands up. He moves to the window. The valley below is still dark, the first gray edge of dawn not yet visible above the eastern ridge. And he stands there with his hands at his sides and his back to her, and she watches the particular quality of his stillness, which is not the stillness of a man processing new information. It is the stillness of a man recognizing something he has been circling for 20 years. Ronan. The Thady family was on that list, he says. Quiet, factual. The voice of someone who already knew the answer before the question finished forming. Yes. My parents, my sister. Yes. A long pause. His shoulders rise and fall with a breath that is controlled in the specific way that control requires effort. And the people who got me out. The people who called in the extraction before the hit came. Sienna's hands are flat on the desk. Her voice, when she speaks, is as level as she can make it, because what she is about to say needs to land cleanly without the interference of emotion. Her emotion, or his. There's a payment in the Calverton outflow records from March of 1999, 14 weeks after the Thade hit. It goes to a subcontractor that Decker's network identifies as a Varon Solutions precursor entity, a private security firm that was absorbed into Varon in 2003. She pauses. The payment description in the internal ledger is 3 words. I need you to look at it yourself. She turns the screen toward him. He comes back to the desk and looks at the screen, and she watches his face as he reads those 3 words. And what happens to his expression is something she has no adequate language for. It is not one thing, but a sequence of things moving through him in rapid succession, each one displacing the last, until what remains is something stripped and absolute and very cold. The 3 words are Callaway, final, resolution. He straightens up slowly. He doesn't speak for a long time. They knew, he says, finally. They knew it was Elena and Marcus who moved me. And 14 weeks later, he stops. His jaw works. They were killed because of me. They were killed because the Calverton Group doesn't leave operational exposure, Sienna says, and her voice is steady because she has been sitting with this knowledge for 3 hours, and she has already done the grieving that 3 hours permits, and now she is on the other side of it, in the harder and cleaner place where grief becomes something actionable. My parents didn't die in a car accident. They died because they saved your life, and the people who wanted you dead found out and tied off the loose end. She looks at him. I've known for 3 hours. I needed to make sure the documentation was airtight before I showed you. Why? Because I needed you to see evidence, not an allegation. Because if this is going to mean anything, if we're going to use this, it has to be unimpeachable. She taps the encrypted drive. Everything is on here. The correlation analysis, the ledger records, the subcontractor chain. Decker can verify the authentication in under 2 hours. Ronan looks at the drive, then at her. You've been sitting here alone with this for 3 hours, he says. Yes. Knowing what it means. Yes. Something moves through his expression. The fractional shift of a man recalibrating not information but understanding, revising the assessment of who he is looking at. He pulls the chair out and sits back down, and for a moment he simply looks at her across the desk with the direct, unornamented attention of someone who has stopped categorizing and started seeing. I'm sorry, he says, for your parents, for what was done to them, for the fact that my life. Don't, she says. Not harshly. You were 15. You didn't make any of the decisions that led to that night. The only people responsible for what happened to them are the people who issued the order and the people who took the money. She pauses. And we have both of those in the file. He is quiet for a moment, then, Decker, he needs to see it, tonight. Tonight, Ronan agrees and stands. Decker is awake. Decker, Sienna has observed, operates on a sleep schedule that appears to be more theoretical than practical. And when Ronan walks him through the documentation at 6 a.m. with Sienna standing at the secondary workstation running the verification protocols in parallel, the specific quality of Decker's silence tells her everything about how significant he understands this to be. He authenticates the ledger records in 40 minutes. The subcontractor chain takes another 20. By 7 a.m., he has cross-referenced the Callaway. Final. Resolution. Entry against 3 independent archival sources and confirm that the payment cleared through the same instrument used for 6 other Calverton operational expenditures during the same fiscal quarter, all of which correspond to documented incidents in the Pacific Northwest criminal record. He takes off his glasses and sets them on the desk and rubs his eyes with the heels of his hands. This closes the 1998 architecture, he says. Everything I've been trying to close for 3 years. This is the keystone. It's also a federal homicide chain, Sienna says. The 3 founding Calverton partners who are still active, their fingerprints are on the authorization structure for that payment. Direct culpability. Decker puts his glasses back on and looks at her with the expression of someone recalculating the scope of what they are building. This isn't just a financial fraud prosecution anymore. No, she says, it's not. The operational meeting happens at 8 a.m. in the main room with the full remaining team, minus Cole, who is in the East Room, and Berg, who is in medical. And Ronan lays out the revised mission parameters with the flat clarity of someone who has finished grieving and started planning. The evidence package is no longer just Sienna's exoneration. It is a comprehensive federal prosecution package covering financial fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and accessory to homicide charges spanning 26 years. The scope requires a federal partner of sufficient seniority to receive and act on the material without it being buried by the political connections that the Calverton Group has spent 2 decades cultivating. Ronan names Audra Fenwick, his FBI contact, and explains her track record with the specific brevity of a man who has already made the decision and is informing rather than consulting. Tasha raises the operational security problem immediately. We have a compromised chain. Cole's relay data gave Calverton our communication patterns for the past 6 weeks. Anything we send through existing channels goes through new channels, Ronan says. Decker has a dark line protocol. We use that for the Fenwick contact. Timeline? 10 days. He looks around the room. We build the complete package in 10 days, and we move it to Fenwick before Calverton can reorganize after the failed perimeter breach. They know they didn't finish the job. They'll be planning the next approach. We need to be faster. The room disperses into work. Sienna is pulling on her jacket to go back to the workstation when Decker catches her at the door to the server room. He is holding a printout, a single page, and the way he is holding it, with the particular reluctance of someone carrying something they wish they didn't have to carry, tells her before she reads it that the revelations are not finished. I ran one more cross-reference, he says, while Ronan was briefing the team. She takes the page. It is a personnel record. Old. The formatting has the specific digital archaeology of a document created in the mid-1990s and later scanned. The header identifies it as an internal record from a federal oversight agency that no longer exists under that name, absorbed into a larger structure after a 2001 reorganization. The name at the top of the record is one she doesn't recognize. But the photograph is Derek Voss, 20 years younger, 30 pounds lighter, with the particular expression of someone at the beginning of a career rather than the middle of one. Her fingers go cold. Derek Voss is not a corporate financial executive, Decker says, with the flatness of a man delivering a diagnosis. He was recruited by the Calverton Group's intelligence division in 2001. His entire career at Mercer Hale, his credentials, his employment history, his professional biography, is constructed. He was placed inside Mercer Hale 6 years ago as an operational asset. A pause. He wasn't your boyfriend who turned on you when things got dangerous. He was the Calverton Group's inside man, and you were his assignment from the beginning. She reads the page again. Her hands are not shaking. She makes them not shake through an act of will that costs her something she can feel but cannot measure. How long? She says. The operation against you appears to have begun approximately 14 months before the frame was executed, which means he was with me for 8 months before they decided I was a threat. She sets the page down on the nearest surface with the care of someone handling something that could break. Everything he said to me, every conversation, the relationship, all of it was operational, Decker says. The word lands like something physical. She stands very still in the doorway of the server room with the mountain light beginning to come through the high windows. Pale, winter thin, casting long shadows across the equipment racks. And she processes this with the systematic completeness of a woman who has built her professional life on finding the truth inside structures designed to obscure it. She was not incidentally framed. She was specifically cultivated over 14 months as a scapegoat for an operation that required someone with her exact professional profile, a forensic accountant inside Mercer Hale with the credentials to make a complex financial fraud believable when it was attributed to her. Derek didn't choose her randomly. He was sent to find her. Every moment she believed was real was architecture. Does Ronan know? She asks. Not yet. She picks up the page. Then let's go tell him. They find Ronan in his office, and Decker lays it out, and this time it is Ronan who is still in the specific way that stillness requires effort, watching Sienna's face as Decker explains, watching the way she receives information that would break most people with the controlled interior processing of someone who has learned, or is learning, in real time, to metabolize devastation into direction. When Decker finishes, Ronan says nothing for a moment. Then, to Sienna, "Are you all right?" She almost says yes because it is the easiest answer. "No," she says instead. "But it doesn't matter right now." "It matters. Not more than what we do with it." She sets the printout on his desk. Derek is a Calverton asset, which means every piece of information he has about me, everything I told him over 14 months, is in their files. My forensic methodology, my contact network, my professional relationships. She pauses. They didn't just frame me. They studied me for over a year first, so they'd know how to do it in a way I couldn't fight. Ronan looks at the photograph on the printout with the eyes of a man filing it under a category that has very specific and non-negotiable consequences. Where's Voss now? Anchorage, based on last known, Decker says. But if Calverton knows their perimeter breach failed, they may have moved him. Find him. Flat, final. Decker leaves. Sienna and Ronan are alone in the office with the pale mountain light and the quiet and the weight of everything that has accumulated in the last 12 hours, coal and the relay device and the 1998 ledger and her parents' names in a Calverton payment record, and now Derek's face in a personnel file that proves the last 2 years of her life were a constructed operation. She sits down in the chair across from his desk. Not because her legs are failing, but because she needs to be deliberate about something, to make a choice about how she is going to carry this, and sitting down is the physical correlate of that decision. "I want to ask you something," she says. "Ask." "The night on the highway, when you found me." She looks at him directly. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't know anything about me. You just stopped." "Yes." "Why does that still feel like the most important thing that's happened to me in 2 years? He holds her gaze with the specific steadiness of a man who doesn't look away from difficult things. "Because it probably is," he says. "It is not comfort. It is not reassurance. It is simply true, and she receives it the way she has learned to receive things from him. Cleanly, without requiring it to be more than it is." Her phone buzzes on the desk, Decker's extension. She picks it up. Decker's voice is stripped of its usual flatness. What is underneath is not panic. It is the tightly controlled urgency of a professional who has found something that changes the operational situation with immediate effect. "Derek Voss is not in Anchorage," he says. "His last confirmed location was 48 hours ago." A pause that is half a second too long. He was here, in the town at the base of the access road. He's been here for 2 days. Sienna's hand tightens on the phone. He knows where we are. He's been here since before the perimeter breach, Decker says. He wasn't coordinating the attack, he was watching to see if it worked. The silence on the line has a different quality now. The quality of a situation whose parameters have just fundamentally changed. Decker, she says, is he still there? A sound of keys, of rapid cross-referencing, of someone looking at surveillance data with the focused speed of someone who needs the answer to be one thing and is discovering it is another. No, Decker says. He checked out of his accommodation 6 hours ago, which is 2 hours before Cole's confession, Sienna says. The math assembles itself with the cold precision of a ledger that is finally balanced, and the number it produces is not the one she wanted. Cole didn't find out about the perimeter breach response through the relay device alone. Someone told him the timing. Someone with knowledge of the estate's internal response protocols, who was positioned close enough to the access road to observe and report in real time. Derek Voss spent 2 days at the base of the mountain. Cole spent 2 days feeding information out through a relay device. And the burner phone that Cole used had a call duration on its second use of 38 seconds, long enough to receive specific instructions, long enough to be told exactly when to position Bergen correctly. The frame wasn't just built around her 2 years ago. It has been rebuilt around this estate, around Ronan, around everything they've assembled in the last 3 weeks, and the man who built it has been standing close enough to watch it snap shut. Sienna sets the phone down and looks at Ronan and says the thing that the evidence has just made undeniable. Derek was never coordinating from Anchorage. He's been running the operation against us personally from 40 miles away, the entire time we've been here. She pauses. Which means he knows about the evidence package. He knows about Fenwick. He knows our 10-day timeline. Ronan stands up from behind the desk with the controlled speed of a man shifting from analysis to action. And what is in his face is not anger and not fear, but the absolute cold clarity of someone who understands that the ground has shifted completely and that survival now requires a different kind of person than the one who walked into this room an hour ago. Then we don't have 10 days, he says. No. How long do we have? She thinks about the 38-second call, about the 6-hour head start Derek has on them, about the Calverton Group's demonstrated capacity to move quickly once they understand a situation has changed. If he's already made contact with Calverton's operational command, she says, and if they move at the speed they moved on the perimeter breach, she does the math. The math is not complicated. The math is, in fact, the simplest and most brutal calculation she has performed since she sat down in the snow on a highway 3 weeks ago and believed she was finished. 48 hours, she says. Maybe less. Ronan picks up his phone and calls Marin and says 4 words. We move tonight. Everything. And somewhere 40 miles down a mountain road, in a vehicle heading toward a satellite phone and a Calverton command line that has been waiting for exactly this report, Derek Voss drives through the early morning dark with the expression of a man who has spent 14 months building something and is finally, at last, about to watch it burn. He doesn't feel what Sienna would call guilt. He feels the specific satisfaction of a professional who has executed a complex operation across an extended timeline without significant error. The Cole recruitment, the Berg positioning, the 2 days at the base of the mountain watching the perimeter breach play out through binoculars from a rented room with bad heating and excellent sight lines. Sentiment is not a variable he carries. It was engineered out of him a long time ago, in rooms she will never see, by people who understood that the most effective instrument is one that doesn't waver. He picks up the satellite phone and dials. It rings twice. Warren Pelcroft answers on the 3rd ring with the unhurried authority of a man who has never needed to rush because he has always controlled the timing of everything. Derek delivers the report in under 2 minutes. The evidence package exists and is more comprehensive than anticipated. The Fenwick contact is confirmed. The 10-day timeline is now their enemy, and Sienna Calloway has become something categorically different from the scapegoat she was recruited to be. She's the architect of the prosecution, Derek says. She built the financial spine herself. Without her, the package loses its expert witness foundation. A pause on the line. Pelcroft thinking, not slowly, but with the deliberate pace of someone who has learned that the first response to significant information is rarely the best one. Then she doesn't reach Fenwick, Pelcroft says. The estate is mobilizing. They'll move her tonight. Then you have tonight. Another pause. Derek, this doesn't end with the woman. You understand that. Derek understands. Ronan Thade, with the complete Calverton financial archive and a federal contact and 20 years of collected leverage, is a different category of threat than Sienna Calloway, with a forensic accounting methodology and righteous anger. Sienna is the evidentiary spine. Ronan is the operational force that delivers it. Both of them need to disappear before the 48 hours run out. I'll need the full Varon team, Derek says. You'll have them by midnight. The line goes dead. Derek sets the satellite phone on the passenger seat and watches the dark road unspool in front of him and thinks about a studio apartment in Anchorage that he furnished with the specific taste of a man performing domesticity and a woman who sat across from him at dinner tables for 8 months believing she was loved, and the particular quality of her focus when she was working, the way she held her pen, the way she never looked up from a ledger until she had found exactly what she was looking for. He thinks about this without feeling. Then he picks up the phone again and calls the Varon coordination line and begins to build the thing that is going to end her before she can finish what she started. Back on the mountain, in a room filling with the controlled urgency of people who understand exactly how much time they don't have, Sienna Calloway opens the encrypted drive, looks at everything inside it, every transaction, every ledger entry, every piece of evidence that connects Warren Pelcroft's name to her parents' deaths, and makes a decision that has nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the people who gave their lives so that someone else could have one. She is done being the thing that disappears. Part 4 của kịch bản điện ảnh này được triển khai với dung lượng 4.000 đến 4.500 từ, bắt đầu trực tiếp từ điểm kết thúc của Part 3. Trọng tâm tuyệt đối là cao trào bùng nổ, the peak of action và stakes. Mỗi mâu thuẫn từ các phần trước giờ đây hội tụ thành một cuộc đối đầu trực diện, không khoan nhượng. Nhịp điệu kịch bản phải cực kỳ dồn dập, căng thẳng đến mức nghẹt thở. Duy trì giọng văn Mỹ thô ráp, tập trung vào những chi tiết bản năng, tiếng tim đập, sự đau đớn thể xác, mồ hôi hòa lẫn máu và sự quyết liệt trong ánh mắt. Nhân vật phải thực hiện những lựa chọn liều lĩnh nhất, chấp nhận đánh đổi mọi thứ để đạt được mục tiêu. Hội thoại trong phần này cần gãy gọn, sắc bén, đôi khi là những tiếng hét hoặc những lời nói đứt quãng vì kiệt sức, đảm bảo liên tục xuất hiện cú twist hấp dẫn theo mạch truyền để gây sự tò mò, gầy càn và cuốn hút để thu hút giữ chân người đọc. Triển khai chi tiết từng phân cảnh hành động hoặc đối đầu tâm lý, scene by scene. Tuyệt đối không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng, tiêu đề phụ hay nhắc đến thực thể tôn giáo. Kết thúc Part 4 ở đỉnh điểm kịch tính, ngay trước khi trận chiến cuối cùng ngã ngủ. Hãy trình bày trực tiếp trong tin nhắn, viết cực kỳ chi tiết. Nếu đặt giới hạn phản hồi, hãy dừng lại ở một câu rạng rỡ để tôi ra lệnh viết tiếp. Chỉ dẫn bắt buộc. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu nhằm mục đích giải trí, không dựa trên bất kỳ sự kiện hay nhân vật có thật nào. Lưu ý đặc biệt quan trọng. Nếu đạt đến giới hạn trả lời, không được dựng giữa câu hay viết nốt câu đó hoàn chỉnh không mở rộng nội dung. Show more the estate moves like a body that has been trained for exactly this. Ronan gives the order at 6:41 a.m., and by 7:15 the server room is being stripped with the systematic efficiency of people who have rehearsed this specific scenario, not as a drill, but as a standing operational contingency. The kind of preparation that exists because the people doing it have needed it before and intend to survive long enough to need it again. Hard drives come out of their housings in precise sequence. The evidence archive transfers to 3 separate encrypted drives that go into 3 separate locations on 3 separate people. Decker works with the focused speed of a man who has done this in worse conditions and keeps his breathing even through the entire process except for one moment, when a transfer protocol stalls for 11 seconds, during which he is very still and his jaw is very tight, and then the protocol clears and he exhales and keeps moving. Sienna packs nothing personal because she has nothing personal. Everything she came to the estate with fits in the duffel bag she arrived with, which Marin has already moved to the primary vehicle. What Sienna carries out of the server room is the encrypted drive and the legal pad, 46 pages of annotated cross-references in her own handwriting, irreplaceable, The physical record of 3 weeks of forensic reconstruction that exists nowhere else in exactly this form. She tucks the legal pad inside her jacket against her ribs. The drive goes in her inside breast pocket. She buttons the jacket over both. Ronan finds her in the corridor at 7:22. He looks at her jacket, at the slight asymmetry where the legal pad sits, and doesn't say anything about it. "We have 4 vehicles," he says. "You're in the second with Decker and Tasha. Marin and I take the lead. Cole," a fractional pause, so small she almost misses it, stays. "He gave us everything on the Calverton contact chain. He stays here with 2 of my people, and he waits for the federal team that Fenwick is sending." His voice carries no heat on Cole's name. No residual anger, no grief, just operational fact. He made his choice. Now he lives with the consequences inside a structure that at least keeps him alive long enough to answer for them properly. She doesn't argue with this. It is the most merciful and least sentimental response available, and it is exactly what she would expect from him. They move at 7:41. The convoy takes the northern access road, not the eastern route that Cole's relay data has compromised, not the primary southern route that Calverton's perimeter team will have mapped, but the northern track that runs along the ridge for 11 miles before descending into a river valley that connects eventually to a secondary highway. The track is not designed for winter vehicle movement. The lead SUV breaks trail through snow that reaches the undercarriage in the deeper sections, and the progress is slow and loud and produces in Sienna's chest the specific tight anxiety of a situation in which speed is survival and speed is not currently available. Decker's in the seat beside her running the dark line protocol on a ruggedized laptop, his fingers moving with the particular economy of someone who has traded physical stillness for digital velocity. "Fenwick's team is 8 hours out by ground," he says, 6 by air if the weather holds. Does the weather hold? He looks at the sky through the window, flat gray, the particular opacity of a cloud ceiling that has not decided yet what it intends to do. For another 4 hours, maybe 5. She does the math. It is the same math she has been doing since she told Ronan 48 hours, which was 12 hours ago, which means they have 36 hours left on the outside, and that number assumes Derek Voss didn't accelerate the timeline the moment his satellite phone call ended. The northern track crests the ridge at 8:53, and the valley opens below them. White and enormous, the river a dark line through the frozen landscape, the secondary highway a gray thread 3 miles out. Ronan's voice comes through the vehicle comm, "Clear so far, maintain spacing." They descend. They are 2 miles from the valley floor when Tasha, who has been monitoring the surveillance frequencies with the headset she has worn continuously since they left the estate, says one word in a voice that is professionally controlled in a way that makes it more alarming than if she'd shouted, "Contact." "Where?" Marin's voice, from the lead vehicle. "Aerial, north-northwest. 2 signatures, low altitude, running without transponders." A pause of 3 seconds during which the only sound in the vehicle is the engine and the snow under the tires and Sienna's own pulse in her ears. "They're not Fenwick's, too fast and too low for a federal approach." Ronan's voice, flat and immediate. "How long?" 7 minutes, maybe 6. "Push for the tree line. Eastern edge of the valley, there's old-growth spruce for half a mile. Get into it." The convoy accelerates. The descent steepens and the lead vehicle takes the gradient hard, snow spraying from the tires and rooster tails, and Sienna braces her hand against the door panel and watches the tree line, dark and dense and 3/4 of a mile away, and counts seconds without meaning to because her brain has been doing arithmetic since she was 12 years old, and it does not stop for emergencies. They reach the trees with 4 minutes to spare. The vehicles go dark, engines off, lights off, everything that produces a heat signature minimized. And Ronan's team deploys into the tree line with the specific quiet of people who understand that sound travels differently in cold air and that a voice carries further than intuition suggests. Sienna gets out of the vehicle, and Decker gets out behind her, and Marin materializes from somewhere to her left and takes her by the arm, not roughly, but with the absolute directional certainty of someone who knows exactly where safe is and is moving her there without discussion. They are 40 meters into the trees when the helicopters come over the ridge. 2 of them, black against the gray sky, running the valley at 200 feet with the systematic sweep pattern of a search rather than a transit. back and forth across the valley floor, infrared equipment visible as protrusions on the nose of each aircraft. They pass over the tree line twice. The second pass is lower, and through the canopy, Sienna can see the search beam sweeping the snow below the trees, and she presses herself against the trunk of a spruce that is wide enough to matter and does not breathe in any way that could be described as fully. The helicopters move south. Their sound diminishes, doesn't disappear. Their holding pattern, Tasha says into the calm, barely above a whisper. Southern end of the valley. They're waiting for something. Ground team, Ronan says. They're pushing us toward the southern end. The helicopters are the stop. The silence that follows this has the quality of a tactical problem resolving into its actual shape. Not a pursuit, but a funnel. And they are inside it, and the narrow end is 2 miles south. Derek planned this before we left the estate, Marin says. Not a question. He planned it before the perimeter breach, Ronan says. The breach was noise. This is the actual operation. A pause. Decker, the dark line. Can you get a signal from inside the tree cover? I need 20 minutes in elevation. You have 15. Take Vanek and go north along the ridge until you get a clear sky. Get Fenwick the location package and the timeline. If I break cover, the helicopters are south. Go north now. Decker looks at Sienna once. A rapid, specific look that transfers something without language. The look of someone making sure a thing is understood before the situation makes understanding impossible. She gives him the second encrypted drive from her inside pocket. He takes it without a word and moves north through the trees with Vanek behind him, and the forest swallows them both in 40 seconds. Ronan reaches her position in the trees. He comes in low and fast and stops beside her with his back against the adjacent trunk, close enough that she can hear his breathing. Controlled, slightly elevated, the respiratory rate of a man operating at high function under significant stress. He looks south through the canopy at the distant sound of the helicopters, and his jaw is set with the specific tension of someone solving a problem that has fewer acceptable solutions than they would like. The ground team, she says. How many? Based on the Varan solutions pattern from the perimeter breach, minimum 8, probably 12. He pauses. They'll have our vehicle signatures from the aerial sweep. They know we're in the trees, they just don't know exactly where. Yet, he agrees. She thinks about the legal pad against her ribs and the encrypted drive in her breast pocket, and the 48 hours that are now 35, and the secondary highway that is 3/4 of a mile through open snow that is currently being swept by aircraft. There's another way to the highway, she says. He looks at her. The river. She has been looking at the terrain since they descended the ridge, mapping it the way she maps financial structures, looking for the load-bearing elements, the hidden routes, the path that exists because the landscape's logic demands it rather than because anyone designed it. It's frozen solid at this temperature. It runs parallel to the highway for 2 miles before it bends south. If we move along the riverbank under the tree cover, we stay out of the aerial sweep and we reach the highway north of their ground team's approach vector. A pause during which he runs the same calculation she just ran and arrives at the same number. The ice has been below -20 for 3 weeks. It'll hold. If it doesn't, then we have a different problem. She meets his eyes. But we won't reach the highway through open ground. Not with those aircraft. He looks at her for 1 second with the complete attention of someone making a high-stakes decision on compressed information, and then he says, Marin, river route, move the team. Marin doesn't hesitate. 4 people, moving north through the tree line, and Sienna is in the middle of the formation with Ronan behind her, and the sound of the helicopters a constant low presence to the south. And the temperature is -18 and dropping, and the legal pad is a rectangle of warmth against her ribs that she is aware of with every step. They reach the riverbank in 11 minutes. The ice is blue-white and opaque in the flat winter light, surface wind-scoured clean of snow, and it stretches south between banks of overhanging spruce like a road that the landscape built specifically for people who needed to disappear. Ronan tests the ice at the bank edge, puts his full weight on it, 1 foot, watches the surface for any response, and it gives nothing. He steps out fully. Nothing. He moves 10 feet from the bank and stops and looks back and nods. They move south along the river in single file, staying within 5 feet of the eastern bank where the ice is thickest, and the tree cover above the bank provides enough canopy that the aerial infrared sweep will read them as ground shadow rather than heat signatures if the angle is right and the altitude stays where it is. It holds for 9 minutes. Then Tasha, at the rear of the formation, says, "Helicopter turning, northern heading." "How far?" "Half a mile south and closing." "Speed." "It's accelerating." Ronan doesn't say anything. He looks at the bank, steep here, 4 feet of frozen earth above the ice, and then at the tree line above it, and then he says, "Bank. Now. Everyone off the ice." They move. 4 feet of frozen bank is not a casual climb at speed in winter boots, and Sienna's left hand, still not at full grip strength from the frostbite, gives out on the first attempt, and she drops back onto the ice, and the impact goes through her knees like a statement about the difference between what a body is designed for and what it is currently being asked to do. Ronan's hand closes around her right arm from above. He made the bank on the first attempt, of course he did. And he pulls, and she finds purchase with her boots, and comes over the lip of the bank and into the trees, and they are both flat on the frozen ground under the spruce canopy when the helicopter sweeps over the river at 150 feet with its infrared beam cutting the ice surface like a knife. It passes. Sienna's face is against the frozen ground, and she can feel the cold of it through her cheek and the hard rectangle of the legal pad against her ribs, and she is breathing in the specific rapid, controlled way of someone whose body has produced a large amount of adrenaline in a short period of time and is now managing the consequences. She becomes aware that Ronan's hand is still on her arm, not gripping anymore, just present, a point of contact in the dark under the trees. She makes herself breathe slower. The helicopter banks south again. They get up. They move. The highway appears between the trees 11 minutes later, a gray line of asphalt, wind-scoured, empty in both directions as far as the tree line permits visibility. Tasha checks frequencies. The ground team is south and east, moving north on the Eastern Valley approach. They have, Tasha estimates, 9 minutes before the nearest element reaches a position with sight lines to this stretch of highway. "Decker," Ronan says into the comm. Static. Then Decker's voice, thin and fractured by distance but present. "I'm here. Dark line is up. Fenwick has the location package. ETA. She's moving a field team from Juneau, 4 hours by air." A pause. "Ronan, she needs the evidence package authenticated on her end before she can get federal warrants moving. She needs Sienna's expert witness declaration recorded and transmitted. She needs it now. Not in 4 hours." The 9 minutes becomes 8. The ground team is moving. Ronan looks at Sienna. She is already pulling the encrypted drive from her breast pocket. "What does she need?" Sienna says into the comm. Decker's voice. "Voice-recorded declaration, encrypted transmission, your credentials and methodology summary. I can receive it on the dark line and push it to Fenwick directly." 3 minutes of audio. 3 minutes. 8 minutes before the ground team has sight lines. 9 people in the tree line with weapons and a direct operational authorization from Warren Pelcroft, who has spent 26 years making problems disappear before they reach federal attention. "Set it up," Sienna says. Decker patches the channel. Marin is watching south through the trees with binoculars, her breath coming in small white clouds in the frozen air, her posture carrying the specific stillness of someone counting down. Tasha has a rifle that Sienna didn't know she was carrying until this moment. Ronan's hand is at his side and his eyes are moving between the southern tree line and Sienna with the rapid alternating attention of someone managing 2 critical variables simultaneously. Sienna straightens her back against a spruce trunk and holds the comm unit and speaks with the flat, precise diction of an expert witness giving sworn testimony, which is exactly what this is. Her name, her credentials, her methodology. The Calverton Group's financial architecture as she reconstructed it across 3 weeks of forensic analysis. The 1998 ledger records. The Callaway. Final. Resolution. Payment entry and its authentication chain. The Mercer-Hale subsidiary structure and the Nevis instrument. The Viren Solutions payment series and its correspondence to operational events. She speaks for 2 minutes and 47 seconds without stopping, and her voice does not waver once. "Got it," Decker says. "Pushing to Fenwick now." Marin says quietly, 6 minutes. The transmission takes 90 seconds to confirm. During those 90 seconds, Sienna holds the comm unit and watches the southern tree line with the others, and the mountain cold works its way through her jacket, and the legal pad against her ribs is a 46-page record of everything she has given the last 3 weeks to build. And she is aware, with the specific clarity of a person who has moved past fear into something harder and more durable, that this is the moment the last 3 weeks were building toward. Not the confrontation, not the escape, but this. Her voice, recorded and transmitted and authenticated, carrying the full weight of what she found into a federal system that the Calverton group cannot reach in time to stop. Decker's voice comes back on the channel. Fenwick confirms receipt. She's moving. Warrants in process. Ronan exhales. One breath. Then he is moving again, toward the highway, gesturing the team forward. And Sienna follows, and the trees thin and the highway opens up, and in the distance to the north, small against the flat winter sky, the lights of a vehicle are moving toward them. Not Calverton. A civilian truck, moving at highway speed, entirely unaware of the 11 armed professionals converging on this stretch of road from 2 directions. "Flag it," Ronan says. Marin is already moving to the highway shoulder. Behind them, the southern tree line produces a sound. Not a shot, not yet, but the specific sound of a large number of people moving through frozen undergrowth at speed, the sound of the last of the 9 minutes running out. Ronan turns to face the southern tree line with the stillness of a man who has been preparing for this specific moment for longer than he knew, and who has finished moving away from it. He looks at Sienna once, direct, complete, the look of someone transferring something without words, and says, "Get in the truck." Ronan. The declaration is transmitted. The package is with Fenwick. You are the case. His voice has no room in it for argument, not because he is commanding, but because he is stating the operational fact with the clarity that the situation demands. If you're not alive to testify, none of it matters. Get in the truck. The civilian vehicle is slowing. Marin is at the shoulder with her hand up, and the driver, a man in his 50s with a face full of confusion, is pulling over because a woman standing on a remote highway in the Alaska winter waving down traffic is not something you drive past. Tasha moves to a position at the tree line edge. Vanek is somewhere in the trees to the north. The southern undergrowth is louder now, closer, and the first figure emerges from the tree line 60 meters south, then a second, then a third, dark-clad and moving with the purposeful spread of a tactical team establishing coverage positions. Sienna doesn't move toward the truck. She looks at Ronan's profile, the sharp jaw, the controlled breath visible in the cold air, the particular way he stands when he has made a decision that he considers final. And she makes a calculation that is not operational and is not forensic and is not any kind of professional assessment. It is simply, no. Sienna. His voice has an edge now. Now. You said innocent people are never collateral damage, she says. That's your code. Yes. Then by your own code, you're not leaving me in that truck alone while you stand here and... The first shot comes from the southern team, not aimed. A warning round that hits a tree trunk 8 feet to Ronan's left and sends bark flying and makes the civilian driver in the truck produce a sound that is half word and half pure animal alarm. Marin's voice from the shoulder. Ronan, decision. And then something happens that none of them planned for. Derek Voss walks out of the southern tree line, not running, not crouching, not moving with the tactical discipline of the team around him. Walking, unhurried. His hands are visible at his sides, and he is wearing the same composed, pleasant expression he wore across dinner tables for 8 months. And he stops 30 meters from Ronan and looks past him at Sienna with the specific focus of someone addressing the person they actually came to speak to. Sienna, he says. His voice carries easily in the cold air. The transmission to Fenwick was intercepted. The words land in the clearing like something physical. We have a relay on the dark line frequency, he continues. We've had it for 6 days. Whatever you sent, We have a copy, and our technical team will have it stripped and corrupted before Fenwick can authenticate it. A pause. Come with me now, and Ronan walks away from this. That's the offer. One time. The clearing is completely still except for the wind. Sienna looks at Derek Voss across 30 meters of frozen ground and 14 months of constructed intimacy and one forensic accounting methodology that he studied for long enough to know exactly how to dismantle it. And she feels something move through her that is not fear and is not rage, but is the specific cold clarity of a woman who has just heard a lie so precisely constructed that its precision is its tell. Because Decker doesn't have a dark line relay vulnerability. She knows this because she spent 6 hours reviewing the protocol architecture with him 3 days ago, and she found the one theoretical intercept point herself, and she watched him close it, and she knows exactly what a transmission on that channel looks like when it has been corrupted and what it looks like when it hasn't. Derek Voss is very good at his job, but she is better at hers. She looks at Ronan. He's lying, she says. The transmission went through clean. Derek's composed expression shifts, barely. A fractional recalibration, the specific micro-expression of a man whose bluff has been called by the one person in the field with the technical knowledge to call it. Ronan reads it, and the clearing stops being still. Tasha fires from the tree line, a suppression round that drives the southern team back into cover. And Marin is moving, and Vanek is moving, and Ronan crosses the distance to Sienna in 4 steps and takes her arm, and they are running for the truck as the clearing erupts into controlled chaos around them. Shots and movement, and the sound of Marin's voice on the comm running tactical coordination with the flat authority of someone who has done this before and intends to do it again. The truck is 10 meters, then 5. Then Derek Voss is in front of them. He came from the left, fast and low, using the truck itself as cover while the firefight drew attention south. And he is close enough that there is no distance for Ronan to manage and no time for anything tactical. And what happens next is not operational. It is personal, and it is brutal, and it is the specific violence of 2 men who represent opposing forces that have been building toward this exact point for 26 years. Ronan hits him once. Derek hits back. They are close enough that neither blow has full extension, and both of them feel it in the ribs and the jaw, and the specific grinding impact of a close-quarters fight between 2 people who are both, in their different ways, professionals at surviving. Sienna has 6 seconds, and she uses them. She gets to the truck. She pulls the passenger door. She looks back. Ronan has Derek against the truck's front panel, and Derek has a blade that he produced from somewhere, and Ronan's left forearm is bleeding in the cold air, blood dark against the snow, and his face has the expression of a man who has moved entirely past thought into pure physical commitment. Ronan, her voice cuts through the noise. He looks at her, 1 second, across the hood of the truck. Then he takes the blade from Derek with the specific controlled technique of someone who learned this in circumstances she will never fully know, and he hits him one more time with the base of his palm, and Derek Voss goes down in the snow and stays there. And Ronan comes around the front of the truck and gets in the driver's side, and the engine is running because the civilian driver, with considerable wisdom, vacated the vehicle approximately 45 seconds ago. They move. The truck accelerates north on the highway, and behind them the sound of the firefight diminishes, and Tasha's voice comes through the comm. Steady, professional, reporting that the southern team is falling back and aerial contact is moving to reposition, and Decker's dark line is still up, and Fenwick's team is now 3 hours and 40 minutes out by Marin's last coordinate. Ronan drives with his left arm braced against the door, the bleeding slowing in the cold. His jaw is tight, and his breathing is elevated, and he is looking at the road ahead with the specific focus of a man who is managing his body's adrenaline response through sheer operational discipline. Sienna looks at his arm. That needs pressure. It needs 3 more hours, he says. Then it can have pressure. She pulls her scarf off and reaches across without asking and wraps it around his forearm with the firm, efficient movements of someone who is not going to allow an argument about this. He doesn't argue. He keeps his eyes on the road and his jaw tight and his hand steady on the wheel. The highway runs north through the white landscape, and the mountain winter holds everything in its flat gray light, and the truck's heater works against the cold that has been working against them since the beginning, and for 47 seconds nothing happens. No contact, no comm traffic, No sound except the engine and the road and the wind across the open ground. Then Decker's voice on the comm, very quiet, with the specific quality of someone delivering information they have verified 3 times before allowing themselves to believe. Sienna, the transmission authenticated. Fenwick has the full package. Warrants are in process as of 11 minutes ago. A pause. It went through. She closes her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When she opens them, the road ahead is empty and white and long, and the gray sky above it is the same sky it has always been. And somewhere 3 hours and 29 minutes out, a federal team is moving toward them with the weight of an authenticated evidence package and 26 years of accumulated truth riding on every minute of the distance between here and there. Ronan's hand is on the wheel. Her scarf is on his arm. The legal pad is against her ribs. She looks at the road. Drive, she says. And in the southern tree line, 30 meters from where a civilian truck's tire tracks are already beginning to fill with drifting snow, Derek Voss pushes himself to his feet with the slow, deliberate movements of a man reassembling his composure from its component parts, and reaches into his jacket for the satellite phone, and stares at it for a long moment with the expression of a man who has just understood, for the first time in 14 months of meticulous construction, that the structure he built has a load-bearing wall he never accounted for. Her, not her credentials, not her forensic methodology or her professional profile or the specific vulnerabilities that 14 months of proximity had mapped with clinical precision. Those he understood completely. He built the frame around them with the exactness of a craftsman who knows his materials. What he never accounted for was the thing underneath all of that. The part of Sienna Calloway that sat in the snow on a highway at -23 and chose, in the last conscious moment available to her, not to lie down and accept it. He dials Pelcroft. The line rings 4 times. Pelcroft answers with the silence of a man who has already been briefed and is waiting for the accounting. The transmission authenticated, Derek says. His voice is level. A professional delivering an accurate status report, even when the status is failure. Fenwick has the package. Warrants are in process. A long pause on the line. The woman, Pelcroft says. In the wind. North Highway. We don't have ground assets ahead of them. Another pause. Longer. The specific quality of silence that belongs to a man recalculating not the operation. The operation is finished, but the personal cost of what comes next. Warren. But Derek uses his name, which he has never done before in 4 years of working for him. It's over. The line is quiet for 8 seconds. Then Pelcroft says, with the exhausted flatness of a man who has finally reached the end of something he has been running from for 26 years, I know. The call ends. Derek stands in the frozen tree line with the dead phone in his hand and the cold working through his jacket and the sound of helicopter rotors beginning to build somewhere to the north. Not Calverton's aircraft. The frequency signature is wrong. These are heavier, federal grade. And he understands with the complete and uncomplicated clarity of a man whose professional architecture has just collapsed that there is nowhere left to route to. He puts the phone in his pocket. He sits down in the snow with his back against a spruce trunk and his forearm across his knee, and he waits, because there is nothing else available to him, and because somewhere in the forensic reconstruction of his own choices, he arrives, finally, at the one fact he spent 14 months engineering around. Sienna Calloway was never the weak point in the structure. She was always the structure. 3 hours and 11 minutes later, the first federal helicopter sets down on the highway shoulder 2 miles north of the river crossing, its rotor wash flattening the snow in a perfect circle. And Audra Fenwick steps out into the Alaska winter with a warrant package that covers 7 names across 3 jurisdictions and 26 years of accumulated culpability. And Sienna Calloway is standing at the tree line with a legal pad under her arm and a scarf that used to be hers wrapped around the forearm of the man beside her. And when Fenwick reaches them and looks at Sienna with the specific expression of a federal agent who has just authenticated the most significant evidence package of her 11-year career, Sienna looks back with the eyes of someone who has been in the snow before and gotten up and is prepared now to finish what getting up started. Agent Fenwick, she says, let's talk about Warren Pelcroft. Audra Fenwick is not a woman who wastes time on ceremony. She takes the encrypted drive from Sienna's hand, turns it once in her gloved fingers with the assessment of someone who has been waiting 11 years for a piece of evidence with this specific weight, and then she looks up at Sienna's face, at the raw cold in her cheeks and the dried blood on her jacket sleeve that isn't hers, and the absolute undefeated steadiness in her eyes, and she says, "You're going to need to walk me through every layer of this in sequence, starting with the Nivis instrument." "I know," Sienna says. "I've been practicing." They set up in the back of the second federal vehicle with a folding table and 2 laptops and the legal pad that has spent the last 4 hours pressed against Sienna's ribs like a second heartbeat. And for 2 hours and 17 minutes, Sienna walks Fenwick through the complete Calverton financial architecture with the methodical precision of someone who has rebuilt this structure so many times in her own mind that she could reconstruct it in the dark, which she essentially has, across 3 weeks in a mountain estate with borrowed equipment and no institutional support and people trying to kill her at intervals. Fenwick asks good questions. Sharp, specific, the questions of someone who understands financial forensics well enough to probe the weak points in an analysis, and who has been building toward this case long enough that she knows where the bodies are buried. Figuratively, and as it turns out, in the Calloway case, literally. When Sienna reaches the Calloway. Final. Resolution. Ledger entry and walks Fenwick through the authentication chain. Fenwick stops writing. She looks at the laptop screen. She looks at Sienna. "Your parents," she says. "Yes." A pause. Fenwick is not a sentimental woman. Her career has required the specific discipline of separating the human cost of criminal enterprise from the evidentiary analysis of it. Because the moment you stop being able to make that separation, you stop being able to do the work. But something moves through her expression that is not professional. It is brief, and it is genuine, and it is the specific acknowledgement of one person to another that some things cost more than they should. "We're going to get all of it," Fenwick says, not as comfort, as operational commitment. "I know," Sienna says. "That's why I'm here." The warrant process moves with the speed of a federal operation that has been waiting for exactly this evidentiary foundation, not building from scratch, but completing a structure that 11 years of investigation had framed without ever being able to roof. By the time the third federal helicopter sets down on the highway shoulder at 2 in the afternoon, the warrants for Warren Pelcroft and the 2 remaining active founding Calverton partners are signed and in execution. Simultaneous raids in Anchorage, Seattle, and a private residence outside of Portland are coordinated through Fenwick's field command with the efficiency of something that has been pre-staged, waiting only for the authentication that Sienna's transmission provided. Ronan's arm gets seen to by a federal medic who works with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to field injuries, and who tapes the laceration with 4 strips of surgical tape and tells him it needs stitches, and he says he knows. And she says, "You're going to get them anyway." And he says, "All right." And the exchange has the quality of 2 professionals reaching a practical agreement, which is the only kind of agreement Ronan Thade has ever been comfortable with. He sits in the open door of the federal vehicle with his forearm taped and his jacket back on, and watches the highway and the tree line and the flat gray sky with the expression of a man who has finished something that has been unfinished for a very long time and is not yet certain what the finished version feels like. Decker arrives from the northern ridge at 3:15 with Vanek behind him and the ruggedized laptop under his arm, and the specific look of a man who has been running on adrenaline and technical focus for 6 hours, and is now becoming aware of his own body in the way that people do when the immediate crisis has passed, and the accumulated cost begins to present itself. He sits down on the vehicle's running board and puts the laptop on his knees and opens it out of pure habit and then closes it again. "It went through," he says. To no one in particular. To the air. "It went through," Ronan confirms. Decker nods, stares at the snow, nods again. Marin materializes from the tree line at 3:40 with Tasha behind her and 2 of Ronan's people who have been holding the southern perimeter since the firefight, and she walks the length of the federal staging area with the inventory assessment of someone accounting for everything that left the estate this morning and confirming what has come back. She counts heads with her eyes. When she reaches Ronan, she stops. "Cole," she says. "Federal team reached the estate at 1400, Ronan says. "He's in custody. He cooperated fully." A pause. Elaine is safe. The kid is safe. Marin absorbs this with the controlled quiet of someone filing information in the correct category. Not relief exactly, but the specific settling of a weight that has been held in the wrong position. And Berg? Medical, shoulder. Ronan looks at her. He'll answer for it. She nods once, moves on to the next accounting. The Calverton arrests begin coming through Fenwick's comm at 4 p.m., and they come in the specific sequence of a federal operation executing with precision. First, the peripheral assets, the financial managers and legal proxies who form the operational outer layer of the structure, and then the core. The Portland arrest is clean. The Seattle arrest involves a 40-minute standoff that resolves without shots fired when the target's attorney advises surrender. The Anchorage arrest, Warren Pelcroft, taken from a private residence where he has apparently been sitting in his study since Derek Voss's phone call, as though he had been waiting, takes 11 minutes from approach to custody. Fenwick reads Sienna the Pelcroft arrest confirmation from her comm unit with the flat factual delivery of a professional reporting a status, and Sienna receives it the same way, standing at the highway shoulder with the winter light going gray and thin around her, and the legal pad in her hand and her face doing the thing it does when she is processing something significant internally, which is almost nothing. A fractional stillness. A breath held for 1 second longer than the last one. Then she says, "What about Derek?" Fenwick's expression doesn't change, but something in it becomes more careful. Voss was located at the southern tree line at 1340. He was not attempting to flee. A pause. He asked for a lawyer, and then gave a voluntary statement. 2 hours of it. Sienna looks at her. What kind of statement? The comprehensive kind. Fenwick holds her gaze with the directness of someone delivering information that has multiple layers and trusting the recipient to handle all of them. Names, dates, operational details going back to his 2001 recruitment. The Calverton Intelligence Division's complete asset roster. 12 years of operational history. She pauses. He gave us everything, Sienna. All of it. Unprompted and on record. The highway is quiet around them. Wind moves across the open ground with the low, constant pressure of the Alaska interior in February. Why? Sienna says. It is not a question about legal strategy. Fenwick understands this. He said, she checks her notes, a deliberate gesture that Sienna reads as Fenwick wanting to be accurate rather than interpretive, that the operation was supposed to be a financial frame, a clean professional termination. When it became an elimination order, he was not informed in advance. A pause. The highway? He didn't know about the highway until after it happened. Sienna stands with this. She stands with it for long enough that the wind moves her hair and the gray light shifts, and a federal agent 20 feet away says something into a radio, and the words don't reach her because she is inside a room of her own building, examining a single piece of information from every available angle, looking for the place where it doesn't hold. She doesn't find one. Derek Voss spent 14 months constructing a professional frame around a woman he had been assigned to study. He did it with the precise, emotionless competence of someone for whom human beings are operational variables. And when that frame was upgraded to a death sentence, when Warren Pelcroft decided that ruining her wasn't sufficient and that the highway in a blizzard was the cleaner solution, something in Derek Voss's carefully engineered absence of sentiment produced, apparently, a limit, not conscience. She is not prepared to call it conscience, but a line, a place where the professional calculus stopped computing. She doesn't forgive him. Forgiveness is not a calculation she is running today or in the foreseeable future, but she files the information in the correct category, which is complicated and human, and not her problem to resolve. Okay, she says. Fenwick looks at her for a moment. Okay? It doesn't change the charges against him. She holds Fenwick's gaze. The frame, the 14 months, the evidence he helped construct against me, none of that is mitigated by the highway. No? Fenwick agrees. It isn't. His cooperation affects sentencing recommendations. It doesn't affect the charges. Then okay, Sienna says again, and means it. She walks back to where Ronan is sitting in the open vehicle door, and she sits beside him in the cold with the legal pad on her knees and they watch the federal operation continue its methodical accounting of the day's events around them, and for a long time neither of them says anything. "Pelcroft is in custody," she says, finally. "I heard." "It doesn't feel the way I thought it would." He is quiet for a moment. "What did you think it would feel like?" She considers this honestly. "Finished. I thought it would feel finished." "It'll feel finished when it's finished," he says. "This is just the part where it becomes possible." He looks at her with the direct, unornamented attention she has come to understand is his only mode when something matters. The legal process is going to take a long time. Depositions, testimony, the prosecution itself. It's not going to be clean. "I know. You're going to have to tell the story of your parents in a federal courtroom." "I know that too." Decky, she looks at the legal pad in her hands. 46 pages of her own handwriting, the physical record of everything she built in 3 weeks from borrowed equipment in a mountainous state, the forensic spine of a prosecution that is going to run for years. "I've been telling their story since I was 3 years old. I just didn't know it was their real story." He says nothing. There is nothing to add to this. The sun sets behind the western ridge at 5:40, and the Alaska interior goes from gray to blue to the specific darkness that has no ambient light in it, just stars and snow reflection and the sweep of the federal vehicle's lights moving on the highway. The temperature drops another 6 degrees. Sienna's breath makes clouds in front of her face, and she watches them disperse and thinks about a bedroom with a cast-iron stove and triple-pane glass, and the first morning she woke up in it, not knowing where she was or who had put her there. She thinks about standing on a highway in a blizzard that was supposed to be the last thing she ever stood in. She thinks about red nodes in a network diagram, and the 3 words in a 26-year-old ledger entry and a 15-year-old boy moved across 3 state lines by 2 people who had no reason to do it, except that it was the right thing, and they were the kind of people who did the right thing regardless of the cost, which was, it turned out, everything. She thinks she would like, very much, to find the grave marker in Portland, the one she visited twice and believed held something it didn't hold. She would like to go there and stand next to it and say, out loud, with no one else present, "I know what you did. I know why. And I finished it. She is going to do this. Not soon, but she is going to do it." Ronan gets his stitches at a clinic 40 miles north, in a small highway town with a gas station and a diner and a medical facility that has 4 rooms and a trauma kit, and a doctor who has been practicing here for 22 years and who closes the laceration with 8 stitches, and the brusque competence of someone who has seen a great deal and has learned to ask only the questions that are medically relevant. Sienna sits in the waiting area with the legal pad and a cup of coffee that is bad in the specific way that small-town diner coffee is bad at 6 p.m., and she reads back through her own notes from the beginning. From the first day at the workstation, the first Mercer Hale filing, the first time she saw Decker's network diagram with its 3 unresolved red nodes. And she reads it like a record of a person she was 3 weeks ago who had no idea what she was building or what it was going to cost her to build it. She closes the legal pad when she reaches the last page. The federal process moves at the pace of federal processes, which is to say, inexorably and without drama. The Pelcroft arraignment happened 6 days after the highway. The 2 remaining founding Calverton partners are arraigned the same week. The financial fraud charges are filed in 3 jurisdictions simultaneously, and the homicide accessory charges, which carry a weight that the financial counts, however significant, cannot match, are filed in the Pacific Northwest Federal District, where Elena and Marcus Calloway were killed in the winter of 1999. Sienna is deposed for the first time 9 days after the highway, in a federal building in Anchorage, in a conference room with a view of the inlet and a stenographer who types with the focused speed of someone accustomed to testimony that moves quickly. She speaks for 6 hours. The prosecutors stop her 3 times to clarify methodology. She clarifies without impatience because the methodology is the case, and the case is her parents, and she has all the patience that precision requires. She is deposed 8 more times over the following months. She testifies twice in open court, once in the financial fraud proceedings, and once in the homicide accessory trial, and both times she sits in the witness box and speaks with the flat, careful accuracy of a forensic expert who understands that the difference between justice and its absence lives in the precision of the language used to describe evidence. And she does not look at Warren Pelcroft once during either appearance because looking at him is not necessary and is not something she chooses to do. Pelcroft's defense attorneys are excellent. They challenge the authentication chain on the 1998 ledger records with the specific technical arguments of people who understand financial forensics well enough to probe its weak points. Sienna's documentation holds. The cross-referencing she built across 3 independent archival sources holds. Decker's network verification holds. It holds because she built it to hold, because she has been building things to hold since she was a forensic accounting student who understood that the difference between a solid structure and a collapsible one is the care taken at the foundation. Pelcroft is convicted on 11 counts. The sentencing hearing produces a number that means he will not leave a federal facility. His composure at sentencing is total, which is the one thing about him that Sienna does not find contemptible. There is a specific kind of dignity available to people who have lived by a code, even a monstrous one, and who face its consequences without flinching. She does not respect it, but she notes it. Derek Voss's sentencing, 6 months later, produces a reduced term that still amounts to 8 years in federal custody. His 2-hour voluntary statement is credited in the sentencing recommendation. Sienna submits a written victim impact statement that is 3 pages long and precise and says exactly what she means without a wasted word, which is the only way she knows how to say things. She does not attend his sentencing. There is nothing she needs to see there. The SEC and FBI joint statement restoring her professional standing is issued the week of the first Calverton conviction. She reads it in Decker's server room, which has been relocated to a commercial office space in Anchorage with actual ergonomic chairs and a coffee machine that works. And she reads it twice and then puts her phone face down on the desk and sits with the specific complicated feeling of having something returned to you that was taken, which is not uncomplicated joy, but something rawer and more structural. The feeling of a load-bearing wall being put back in the place where it belongs. Her forensic accounting license is reinstated the following week. She frames the reinstatement letter, not on a wall, in a drawer, where she can find it when she needs to remember what things cost and what they're worth. The Thade Foundation is Ronan's idea first, and Sienna's architecture second, which is the natural division of their respective competencies, and which produces, within 18 months, an organization that is more operationally sound than either of them would have built alone. The mandate is Sienna's: financial and legal support for individuals wrongfully framed for financial crimes, with specific focus on cases where the target lacked institutional resources for adequate defense. The founding case studies are, without naming names, drawn from the Calverton Group's documented history of internal scapegoating, 3 cases across 6 years, 2 of which are reopened with foundation support and result in exonerations. Ronan's legitimization is not a clean story, and he tells it that way to the people who need to hear it: his lawyers, the oversight structures they build into the foundation's governance, the federal liaison contact that Fenwick becomes after her own career advancement makes the relationship officially bilateral rather than the asymmetrical intelligence sharing arrangement it used to be. He dismantles the criminal architecture methodically, over 2 years, with the same precision he applied to building it. Some pieces are easier than others. None of it is without cost. He doesn't pretend otherwise. This is, Sienna thinks, the thing about him that she trusts most. Not his capability, which is formidable, and not his code, which is genuine, but his absolute refusal to pretend that the things that cost something didn't cost it. Cole Varick pleads guilty to his charges in federal court and receives a sentence that reflects both his culpability and his cooperation. His sister Elaine attends his sentencing with her daughter, who is 5 and does not understand where her uncle is going or why, and holds his hand in the courthouse hallway before they take him in. Sienna is not there, but she knows about it because Marin tells her, and she sits with that knowledge in the specific way she has learned to sit with complicated things, not resolving them, not categorizing them as acceptable or unacceptable, but holding them at the exact weight they actually carry. Berg receives a lesser charge and a suspended sentence in exchange for testimony. He leaves Alaska the week his sentence is handed down and does not come back. Decker stays. He builds the Foundation's cybersecurity and fraud investigation division from a server room with actual ventilation and buys himself an ergonomic chair that he has been wanting for 3 years, and sits in it with the specific satisfaction of a man whose professional environment has finally caught up with his professional requirements. Marin retires in the second year to a property in northern British Columbia that turns out to be a 40-acre parcel of mixed forest and river access that she has apparently been planning to buy since approximately 2019, which means she has been working toward this for longer than most people plan anything. She sends Sienna a photograph of the property the week she arrives. Trees, river, snow on the ground, no people in the frame. The caption is 2 words: "Finally here." Sienna looks at it for a long time and then saves it to her phone in a folder she labels, with the forensic accountant's instinct for accurate categorization, people who made it. Tasha takes Marin's security role. She is better at the administrative components than Marin was and roughly equivalent on everything else, which is an assessment Marin herself offers without being asked, and which Tasha receives with the specific expression of someone who understands that this is the highest praise available from that particular source. The Portland grave marker is smaller than Sienna remembers from her 2 visits. The cemetery is quiet in the way that February cemeteries in the Pacific Northwest are quiet, rain-soaked and green and indifferent to human presence in a way that is not unkind. She stands in front of the marker for a long time without saying anything. Then she says what she came to say, out loud, with no one else present. The words are not the ones she planned on the flight down. They are simpler, more direct, stripped of the formal weight she had been preparing to give them. She says, I know what you did and why and who you did it for. And I found the people who took you from him, and I built the case that put them away. And it took 26 years and a blizzard, and a man who didn't know he owed you his life until I showed him the ledger entry with your names on it, and none of that is easy to account for or to carry. She pauses. She says, but it's done. It's finished, and I'm going to go home now. She stands there for another minute in the February rain with her hands in her pockets and her face turned down toward the marker and the cold working through her jacket, in the specific Pacific Northwest way that is damp rather than sharp, and then she turns and walks back through the cemetery to the rental car and drives to the airport and gets on the plane. Ronan picks her up from the Anchorage airport at 9 p.m. He is parked in the short-term lot with the engine running and the heater on and a coffee in the cup holder on the passenger side that is still hot, which means he timed the departure from the Foundation's office in downtown Anchorage with the precision of someone who takes the small logistics of care as seriously as the large ones. She gets in. She picks up the coffee. She looks at him. How was it? He says. Hard, she says. And right. She pauses. Both at the same time. He nods, puts the car in drive. They don't talk much on the drive north, which is not the silence of people who have run out of things to say, but the silence of people who have said enough for one day and are comfortable with the space the quiet makes. The highway runs through the dark, and the Alaska winter presses at the windows, and the heater runs, and the coffee is warm in her hands. The cabin on the lake comes later, not that year and not the next, but in the third year, found by Ronan with the specific intentionality of a man who has been looking for a particular feeling for a long time and knows it when the landscape finally produces it. 40 miles from the estate. A different mountain, a different valley, a lake that goes perfectly flat under the ice in the deep cold and reflects the stars on the nights when the sky is clear enough. They build something there, not quickly and not without difficulty, and not without the specific friction of 2 people who have spent their lives operating autonomously, learning to share a space with the same precision they apply to everything else. There are arguments about operational logistics that are really arguments about trust, and arguments about trust that are really about fear, and fear that is really about the accumulated cost of everything that happened before the cabin, before the foundation, before Fenwick's field team on the highway shoulder in the February dark. They work through it. With the same systematic methodology they apply to everything, identifying the load-bearing elements, cross-referencing the variables, finding the place where things don't add up, and staying there until they do. Their son is born in the 4th year. They name him Marcus without discussing any other options, which is the only decision in Sienna's recent memory that required no analysis at all. He has Sienna's precision and Ronan's patience, and a laugh that arrives without warning and fills rooms, and he does not yet know the story of what his name means, or the people it honors, or the chain of consequence that runs from a January night in 1999 through a February blizzard and a mountain estate and a highway in the Alaska interior and a federal courtroom and a grave marker in a Portland cemetery and a lake in the Alaska Range interior, all the way to him. A small person in a red coat standing at the edge of the ice in the February cold, holding his hands out for the snow. Sienna stands in the doorway with coffee she hasn't drunk yet and watches him and feels the weight of everything that led here in the specific way she feels all significant things. Not as abstraction, but as structure, load-bearing and real, the foundation beneath the life that is currently standing on it. Ronan comes to stand beside her. His shoulder is warm against hers. He is holding his own coffee and looking at their son with the expression of a man who spent 26 years not knowing the full shape of the debt he carried, and who now knows it completely, and who has paid it in the only currency that was ever going to satisfy it. Not money, not power, not the careful architecture of a criminal empire that could protect everything except the things worth protecting. A life, built carefully, held with both hands. The snow falls on the lake and their son laughs in the cold, and the mountains hold the valley the way they have always held it, without comment, without judgment, simply present. And the storm that should have buried Sienna Calloway in an Alaska highway 3 years ago is only what it always was: weather. Something that passed. What remained is this: the coffee is warm, the boy is laughing, the ice holds, and the debt, finally, is paid in full.